There are certain things that sneak up on you. Not the big ones, not the diagnosis, not the moment the doctor uses words like progressive and irreversible, and you sit there nodding like you understand what your life is about to become. Those moments hit you square in the chest, and you know, right then, that something has changed forever. I'm talking about the smaller things. The way you stop sleeping past 4 in the morning because some part of your brain stays wired to the monitor even when it's quiet. The way you eat standing at the kitchen counter because sitting down at the table alone feels wrong. The way you stop answering when people ask how you're doing because the honest answer takes too long and they don't really want to hear it anyway. My name is not important. What happened to me is, I turned 68 last March. My wife, Sandra, had been living with early onset Alzheimer's for 3 years by then, diagnosed at 63, which the neurologist told us was uncommon but not rare. She'd been a kindergarten teacher for 27 years at Maplewood Elementary in Greensboro, North Carolina. Loved those kids like they were her own. By the time we got the diagnosis, she'd already been quietly struggling for almost 2 years. Losing words mid-sentence, misplacing her keys in the freezer, calling our daughter by our daughter's childhood nickname, and then going pale when she realized she couldn't remember the real name underneath it. We'd both been pretending not to notice. That's what you do when you're not ready. I retired early to take care of her. We had $362,000 in our retirement accounts. 34 years of contributing to my 403b at the school district where I worked as a facilities manager. Not rich by any stretch, but enough. Enough to take care of her, keep the house on Birchwood Drive, and maybe, someday, cover the kind of long-term care we both knew was coming. I paid off the car. I let the boat go. I canceled the fishing trip to Montana I'd been planning since 2019. None of that mattered anymore. What mattered was getting Sandra through each day with as much dignity as possible. Our daughter, Melissa, lived 40 minutes away in Burlington. She called every Sunday. She sent flowers on Sandra's birthday. She was good about that. Our son-in-law, Kevin, Melissa's husband, was quieter, more reserved, but I always respected him. He worked in commercial insurance, steady guy, didn't say much, but when he said something, it meant something. Then there was our son. His name is Jonathan. He's 41, and I'm going to tell you exactly what he did. Jonathan had always been the one who knew how to make you feel like things were under control. He had a way of walking into a room and immediately diagnosing what was wrong and offering a solution, and you'd find yourself nodding before you'd even thought it through. He was like that as a kid, too. Always the one who fixed the argument, smoothed over the tension at Thanksgiving, made his grandmother laugh when nobody else could. I was proud of him for that. I told him so. When Sandra's condition started getting harder, when she started having trouble recognizing where she was in our own house, when she'd wake up at 2 in the morning convinced she needed to get her students ready for school, Jonathan started coming around more. He'd drive up from Raleigh on weekends. He helped me install grab bars in the bathroom. He researched memory care facilities online and printed out comparison sheets and left them on the kitchen table with sticky notes. He brought Sandra her favorite peach cobbler from the bakery on Elm Street because she still remembered she loved it, even when she couldn't remember what year it was. I was grateful. I told him that too. It was a Sunday in September when he first brought up the paperwork. We were sitting on the back porch after lunch, Sandra asleep inside, and he leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and looked at me the way he used to look at me when he was a teenager about to tell me something he thought I wasn't going to like. "Dad," he said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about it before you answer." I told him to go ahead. "If something happens to you tomorrow," he said, "I'm not trying to scare you, but if you had a heart attack, if you got hurt, what happens to Mom? Who can access the accounts? Who makes the decisions?" I hadn't thought about it that way. Sandra's healthcare proxy was already set up through her neurologist's office, and I was her primary caregiver. But Jonathan was right that my own affairs were less organized than they should have been. I told him I'd think about it. He came back the following weekend with a folder. The folder had tabs. It had a section on durable power of attorney, a section on healthcare directives, a section on financial accounts. He'd typed up a summary sheet, clean, professional looking, that laid out exactly what documents we needed and in what order. He said he'd already spoken to an estate attorney he knew in Raleigh who could put it together at a reduced rate. He said he wanted to be listed as financial POA, not to take over anything, just so that if something happened to me, the bills would keep getting paid and Sandra would be taken care of. He said he could manage the financial side completely, and it would take a weight off my shoulders. I remember sitting at the kitchen table looking at that folder and feeling something loosen in my chest. I'd been carrying so much: the medications, the appointments at the UNC Memory Care Clinic, the insurance appeals, the grocery runs, the pharmacy, the nights. I was so tired, and here was my son, organized and capable and present, telling me he wanted to carry some of it. I signed the paperwork. I found out later, much later, that the notary stamp on those documents was applied after the fact, that Jonathan had taken the papers to a notary already signed. A notary is supposed to witness the signature, that's the entire point. But I didn't know that then. I trusted my son. Over the next several months, Jonathan started managing the bills. He had access to the primary checking account, which I'd added him to so he could handle automatic payments. He started handling the insurance calls. He set up a new online portal for the retirement account and showed me how to log in, walked me through the interface, explained the statements. It all seemed helpful. It all seemed like my son taking care of things the way he'd always taken care of things. Sandra got worse that winter. There were weeks where I barely left the house. She had a fall in January. Nothing broken, thank God, but it scared us both badly enough that I started sleeping on the couch to hear her if she got up in the night. I was running on 4 hours of sleep and protein bars and stubbornness. Jonathan would check in by text, send me articles about caregiver burnout, ask how I was holding up. I told him I was fine. I told everyone I was fine. I didn't look at the retirement account statements from October through February. I don't say that to excuse myself. I say it because I need you to understand what those months were like. There were days I didn't know what day it was. There were days I thought about things I'm not going to say out loud on this video. The paperwork, the accounts, the numbers, all of that had receded to somewhere very far away. Jonathan was handling it. I trusted him. In March, Kevin came down to help me with some repairs around the house. He's good with his hands, Kevin. He fixed the gutter on the back of the house and helped me move Sandra's bed closer to the window the way she liked. We ordered pizza and ate it at the kitchen table while Sandra rested, and at some point he pulled out his phone and set it on the table between us and slid it toward me without saying anything. On the screen was a question. Have you looked at your retirement account recently? I looked up at him. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the wall behind me. His jaw was tight. I asked him what he meant. He said, very quietly, that Melissa had noticed something when she was helping me organize some mail during her last visit. A statement, a number that didn't match what it should have been. He said he'd done some checking. He said he didn't want to be wrong, and he didn't want to say more until I looked for myself. He slid his phone back into his pocket and stood up to get more pizza and didn't say another word about it. I waited until he left. I sat down at the kitchen desk, opened the laptop, and logged into the retirement account portal. The portal Jonathan had set up, the one he'd walked me through. The balance was $41,100. I sat there for a long time without moving. I thought I'd made an error. I navigated backward and forward. I refreshed the page twice. I checked the account number against an old statement I found in the filing cabinet. Same account, same number, $41,200. I pulled up the transaction history. From October through February, 5 months, there had been 47 withdrawals. Some were small, $800, one $200. Some were large. One in December was $14,500. One in January, during the week of Sandra's fall, was $18,000. The descriptions were generic. Transfer to external account. Transfer to external account. Transfer to external account. I am not going to tell you what it felt like to sit at that desk and read those numbers. I don't have the words for it, and I don't think words would do it justice anyway. I will tell you that at some point Sandra called from the bedroom, and I went to her and made sure she was comfortable, and brought her a glass of water and told her everything was fine, and then I came back to the desk and I called my son. He answered on the second ring. He said, "Hey Dad, how's Mom doing?" And I said, "I need you to tell me about the retirement account." There was a pause. Not long, maybe 2 seconds. But I've known that boy for 41 years and I know what his 2-second pause sounds like. He said he didn't know what I was talking about. I read him the December figure. He said those were authorized transfers. He said I'd told him, sometime back in October, that I wanted to consolidate the accounts. He said I'd been confused that day and maybe I didn't remember. He said the money had been moved to a different investment vehicle, and he could show me the paperwork if I'd just calm down. He said I was tired and grieving and not thinking straight. He used Sandra's diagnosis against me. He suggested gently that I might be experiencing some cognitive difficulties of my own, and maybe it was time to talk to a doctor. I hung up the phone. I sat at that desk until midnight. I pulled every piece of paper I could find. I went through the filing cabinet drawer by drawer, and I found something Jonathan had missed. A secondary statement from the brokerage, a paper one that had been mailed to the house and tucked inside a manila envelope with some old tax documents. It showed the account balance as of September 30th. The account he had helped me set up online access for, $358,000. From September 30th to March, more than $300,000 had moved out of that account in increments small enough to avoid automatic fraud alerts, but large enough to matter enormously. The next morning I called an elder law attorney whose name I'd gotten from the Guilford County Senior Services Office 2 years earlier and never used. Her name was Patricia, not a name from that list, a real woman with a real office on West Market Street in Greensboro who had seen this before. She had, as it turned out, seen this exact thing before. She told me that this pattern, gradual, incremental withdrawals over several months, timed around a caregiver crisis, was one of the most common forms of elder financial abuse she encountered. She said the phrase elder financial abuse like it was a clinical term, which it is, and hearing it applied to my situation did something strange to me. Made it real in a different way. She pulled the POA documents. She examined them. She looked at me across her desk and told me that those documents were invalid. A valid POA in North Carolina requires the principal's signature to be witnessed by the notary at the time of signing. The documents Jonathan had brought me had been signed and then taken to a notary after the fact. The notary had stamped them without witnessing anything. That stamp was fraudulent. The notary, it turned out, was a friend of Jonathan's, someone he'd known since his mid-20s who worked at a title company in Raleigh. Because the POA was invalid, every transaction Jonathan had authorized using it was potentially fraudulent. Patricia filed a complaint with the North Carolina of Justice's Consumer Protection Division. She contacted the Guilford County Sheriff's Office, which has an elder abuse unit. She sent certified letters to the brokerage firm, documenting the fraudulent POA and requesting a full transaction freeze pending investigation. She moved with a speed and competence that I found both reassuring and slightly terrifying, because it told me she had done this before, many times, and that what had happened to me was not unusual. Jonathan called 3 more times that week, once to apologize, vaguely, for misunderstandings, once to tell me that he had domication that proved everything was legitimate and I should talk to him before I did anything I'd regret, once at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night to tell me that I was tearing the family apart over a misunderstanding, and that Mom would be devastated if she knew what I was doing. I stopped answering his calls. Melissa drove down the following Saturday. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Jonathan had sat with his folder and his tab dividers and his careful explanations, and she cried for a long time without saying anything. Then she helped me organize the documents into a binder. We went through every withdrawal together. She built a spreadsheet, transaction by transaction, 5 months of theft laid out in rows. The total was $316,800. $316,800. 34 years of contributions. Accumulated slowly and carefully in a 403 IB that I'd barely touched because we'd planned to live off of it while we took care of Sandra together. Her memory was going, but the account had been supposed to be stable. Supposed to be there. Kevin, my son-in-law, said almost nothing during any of this. He came with Melissa. He sat in the living room and kept Sandra company while Melissa and I worked at the kitchen table. At one point, Sandra held his hand and told him he had kind eyes, and he thanked her very seriously, like it was important information, which I think he understood it was. What he'd done, showing me that message, sliding his phone across the table, saying almost nothing, had saved me from losing whatever remained. If he'd waited another 2 months, there might not have been $41,200 left either. The investigation moved slowly in the way that legal investigations always do. Jonathan retained a criminal defense attorney out of Raleigh. There were months of documents and depositions and certified mail and bureaucratic silence. The notary cooperated with investigators and provided a statement confirming that he had not witnessed the signatures. The brokerage firm's fraud department recovered documentation, of the external account the funds had been transferred into. A business account in Jonathan's name, opened in August, 3 weeks before the first withdrawal. He had planned this in advance. He had come to me with the folder and the tabs and the kind voice and the peach cobbler for Sandra, and he had planned this in advance. In January of the following year, Jonathan was indicted on 3 felony counts: financial exploitation of an elder adult, obtaining property by false pretenses, and felony conspiracy. The notary was charged as a co-conspirator. Jonathan's attorney negotiated for months. In the end, Jonathan pleaded guilty to 1 count of financial exploitation and was sentenced to 22 months in a North Carolina correctional facility, with additional supervised probation and a restitution order for the full amount. The restitution doesn't come all at once. It comes in installments, and it will come for years. I don't have access to the full $316,800 right now. I probably never will, not all of it, not in a lump sum. But the restitution order is real, and it is being enforced, and that matters. What I have now is different from what I had before, and I want to be honest with you about that. Sandra's condition has continued to progress. She's in a memory care facility now, a good one, a Methodist-affiliated community on the east side of Greensboro that has an enclosed garden she walks in every morning. The cost is just over $7,200 a month, which is on the lower end because we qualified for a long-term care scholarship through the facility's foundation, and because I reapplied, with Patricia's help, for Medicaid spend-down provisions that I hadn't known existed. It is not easy, it is not comfortable, but she is safe and she is cared for, and on the days she knows who I am, she tells me she loves the garden. I visit her every day except Thursdays, when I have a standing coffee at the Harris Teeter on Friendly Avenue with 2 men I met at an Alzheimer's caregiver support group at the YMCA. One of them has been doing this for 6 years. He told me in our first conversation that the hardest part wasn't the caregiving itself. It was the loneliness of it, and I understood exactly what he meant and felt slightly less alone because of it. If you are watching this and you have an aging parent, or you are an aging parent yourself, I need to tell you something directly. Get a copy of every account statement yourself. Set up your own online access before anyone else helps you set it up. If someone offers to manage your finances for you, even someone you love, especially someone you love, make sure a second trusted person knows about it. Not to be suspicious, not to be cruel. Just because trust is not the same as oversight, and the absence of oversight is where these things happen. And if anyone at all, ever tells you that your confusion or your grief or your exhaustion means you can't trust what you're seeing with your own eyes, hang up the phone. I know what I saw. I know exactly what happened. Sandra is in the garden right now, probably, walking slow circles in the morning light, touching the fence the way she does. I'll be there at noon. I'll bring her decaf coffee with the hazelnut creamer she likes, and I'll sit with her under the pergola, and I will not think about the account balance, or the documents, or the folder with the tabs. I will just sit with her and watch her touch the fence. That's what's left, and it's enough.